The desert was already angry before anyone spoke. Wind pushed thin sheets of dust across the dry set, rattling cables, tapping against metal trailers, whispering through a half-built frontier town that looked real from a distance and dead up close. By late afternoon, the sun had turned everything the color of old brass, and the crew had reached that dangerous hour when patience becomes pride, and pride starts looking for a target. A camera sat idle on its dolly, like an animal held on a chain. Extras in denim and sweat-dark hats stood in clusters, not talking much now, just watching. They had been waiting nearly 3 hours, waiting for one man. Then a silver trailer door opened, and Bruce Lee stepped down in a black suit, carrying a plain tin cup of coffee, as if he had arrived at the exact right moment. That was when the day changed. It was not a glamorous set. This was the far edge of Nevada, a punishing stretch of land rented for a low, brutal Western that prided itself on authenticity. No shade except what a trailer cast. No softness except what people pretended to have. The production had gathered a strange congregation. Stunt riders with broken noses, young camera assistants hungry to impress, veteran grips with cigarette voices, studio representatives worried about money, and local men who had heard a film star was nearby and came to watch trouble from a useful distance. 2 magazine reporters stood near the generator truck, pretending boredom while memorizing faces. A few gamblers from Reno had driven out just to see whether the whispers were true, whether the martial arts legend was difficult, arrogant, impossible. They expected a scene. They wanted one. Delay on a film set meant blood in the social water. Time was money, but humiliation was entertainment. And by then, the crowd had started choosing sides before the first word was spoken. At the center of that mood stood Clint, the film's lead and unofficial ruler of the desert. He was not merely famous. He was the kind of man whose silence made younger actors forget their lines. Lean, weathered, and dry as fence wood, Clint had built a career on hard men who blinked less than everyone around them. Crews loved him because he worked fast. Producers loved him because he made money. Men like him because he seemed carved from the same rock they wished they were. That day, he had been in costume since noon, horse-saddled, light-measured, scene-blocked, while every lost minute burned cash in front of 40 witnesses. He did not pace. He did not rant. He just stood there, with his hands near his jacket pockets, jaw set, looking toward Bruce's trailer, as if he were studying a problem he intended to solve permanently. In that silence, his authority grew heavier than shouting. Bruce entered the scene without apology and without hurry. No sunglasses, no entourage, no theatrical grin to soften the room. He stepped down from the trailer in polished black shoes that seemed absurd against the dust, then stopped once, lightly, to feel the wind against his face, as though it carried information. He looked smaller than the Western men around him, narrower, cleaner, almost too composed for a place built on blunt force. That was exactly why some dismissed him. To them, he seemed like a visiting celebrity from another kind of picture, a man of interviews and headlines, not a desert production running behind schedule. Yet the more perceptive ones noticed something else. Bruce wasted nothing, not one movement, not one glance. His eyes touched the set, the crew, the camera track, Clint, then returned to stillness. He held the cup in one hand like it weighed nothing. A few people stopped smirking. They did not know why. The first voice came from behind the camera truck, a stuntman loud enough to borrow courage from the crowd. "Hope the sun waits for celebrities." A few men laughed, too quickly. Clint did not. He stepped forward until the dust between him and Bruce seemed measured. There was no grand insult, no wild tantrum. That would have made the moment easier. Instead, Clint spoke with the calm cruelty of a man who knew the whole set would remember every syllable. "You're late," he said. Then, after a pause sharp enough to cut wire, he added 5 words. "Men don't arrive after respect." The line landed harder than yelling. Some lowered their eyes, others stared at Bruce, waiting for heat, ego, explanation. Bruce set the cup on the trailer step, looked at Clint for a long second, and said only, "Then let us see who understands it." The set became still in a new way. No one called for cameras, but every person there leaned inward, as if a lens had opened inside the air itself. The wind seemed to pull back. Clint moved first, not with a fist, but with the contemptuous confidence of a man trying to crowd another man out of space. His shoulder angled in, his chest rose. It was the kind of pressure Western sets understood, physical, deniable, public. Bruce did not retreat. He turned only a fraction, letting Clint's forward drive pass into emptiness, and one open hand touched Clint's forearm with such casual precision that the older man's balance broke before his pride registered it. Clint stumbled half a step, caught himself, and the entire circle of onlookers inhaled at once. Bruce had not struck him. He had erased his momentum. Clint's face changed. So did the mood. This was no longer a delayed actor being disciplined in front of a crew. This was structure meeting someone who could read it. Clint came again, faster and angrier now, and with him came the old logic of power, bigger frame, harder intent, public dominance. Bruce answered with almost nothing. A shift of heel, a line of shoulder, a hand rising exactly where force had already decided to travel. Clint's grab missed by inches and found air. Bruce checked the wrist, redirected the elbow, and placed 2 short strikes into the body. Not wild, not dramatic, just compact, mechanical truth. The sound was soft. The effect was not. Clint's breath shortened. He swung wide, desperation appearing where certainty had been. Bruce slipped inside the arc and stopped a fist 1 inch from Clint's throat, not touching, just there. Then a low stop kick folded Clint's stance and sent him down to 1 knee in the dust. No flourish followed. Bruce stood over nothing, chasing nothing. The humiliation came not from violence, but from how little violence was required. For a suspended second, the desert forgot how to make noise. No horse shifted, no crewman coughed. Even the generator seemed farther away. Clint remained on 1 knee, 1 hand pressed to the ground, staring at the dust as if trying to understand when it had risen to meet him. He looked up, and in his face was the hardest realization for any powerful man. Not that he had been beaten, but that the contest had belonged to someone else from the beginning. Bruce lowered his hand and stepped back, offering distance instead of triumph. Clint tested his breath, then his legs, but whatever he had intended to prove had already collapsed in the eyes around him. The crowd did not erupt. That would have cheapened it. Instead, there came a delayed, uneven murmur, the sound people make when a private belief breaks in public. Bruce picked up his tin cup again, as if the interruption were over. What followed mattered more than the fall. Bruce did not turn to the crowd for approval, and that refusal shifted the atmosphere faster than any victory pose could have. Clint rose slowly, brushing dust from his knee with the rigid care of a man rebuilding himself in front of witnesses. The reporters looked hungry. The gamblers looked disappointed that no blood had spilled. The stuntmen, though, looked thoughtful now, like craftsmen who had just seen a better tool used correctly. Clint met Bruce's eyes once more. "You could have broken me," he said. Bruce answered, in a voice so quiet the nearest men had to stop breathing to hear it. "That would have proven your fear, not my discipline." Something in the line moved through the set like clean water. No one laughed after that. The assistant director finally called everyone back to places, but the old mood was gone. The desert still looked harsh. The people no longer did. Years later, the story would be told badly by men who loved spectacle more than truth. They would say, Bruce humiliated a star, ended a career, conquered a set. But that was not what the desert remembered. The men who stood there remembered something rarer and more difficult, a master refusing to become smaller just because others were. He had arrived late, yes, but not confused, not defensive, not eager to prove himself with noise. Clint's 5 words had been meant as judgment, a sentence delivered before understanding. Bruce answered not with argument, but with clarity so exact it stripped performance from power. In the end, the day did not belong to the man who spoke hardest, or the man who stood tallest in dust and sunlight. It belonged to the one who remained in command of himself, and that is why legends endure, not because they defeat other men, but because they never surrender to them first. Do you think Bruce Lee won that moment with skill or with self-control? Comment below and subscribe if you want more stories like this.